Welcome to the Pacey Performance Podcast. Today, I'm speaking with Director of Performance Services at the Canadian Sports Institute, Jeremy Sheppard. So episode 103 of the Pacey Performance Podcast. Thanks again for tuning in and listening. So today we have Jeremy Sheppard in a new role this time. So coming from episode 28 when he was with Surfing Australia to 103 when he's back home, back in Canada. So today's episode we chat about that transition and how things differ for Jeremy at the minute compared to what he was doing almost 2 years ago now. So we also get into the obvious, the training chat. So a lot of Jeremy's experience with volleyball players and jumping and the mechanisms around jumping. So we get into that in the second part of the episode. So just before I get going with Jeremy and the chat we have, I just want to introduce you to Ethan at Coach Me Plus, who's going to discuss music and arousal for the next couple of minutes. So it's definitely a topic we haven't touched on with the main guest in any podcast. So really interesting little bite-sized bit of audio from Ethan at Coach Me Plus. So I hope you enjoy both the little segment from Ethan and the episode with Jeremy, and I will speak to you soon.
In this Sports Science Minute, I just wanted to have a quick discussion on music and its effect on motivation and arousal. If we go to high-performance environments, most of the ones I've seen, pre-game, the locker room is silent. And that's really interesting because music affects motivation and arousal in our athletes significantly differently a lot of times between athletes. Me personally, I'm a music person, so I always like to have my headphones in before big events. A lot of other athletes nap. Apollo Anton Ono, he always used to yawn before his skating events. There are a lot of athletes that just like to zone out. A lot of athletes just like to joke around and try to keep it light. And I think that's really interesting because when we go into the weight room environment, most of the weight room environments I've seen, there's always a lot of music that's always really loud, and it's usually either really hard rock, metal type music, or hip hop. And that's really interesting because the contrast to that is pregame. It's usually the locker room is silent and everybody gets to kind of individualize how they need to mentally prepare. And so the point of this Sports Science Minute is to maybe challenge the norm a little bit and think about the music that we're playing, what type of music, how loud it should be in the weight room, because that affects the motivation and the arousal state of our athletes. And so maybe hard metal or hip hop that's really loud is affecting our athletes when they're trying to get a good training session and in the weight room. So maybe I'm going against the norm a little bit, but just challenges us to maybe think about something a little differently than what we're normally used to in weight room environments. All right, hope that helps.
Thanks for tuning in to the Pacey Performance Podcast. So today I have Jeremy Sheppard coming for a part two. So I don't know if Jeremy remembers, but he was number 28, and that was probably definitely going on 2 years. So a few things have changed since then, I think, for me and definitely for Jeremy. So just want to thank him for his time and welcome him again to the podcast. So welcome, Jeremy.
Thanks, man. It's great to be a part of this. I've been listening to the podcast pretty methodically, and not only are you becoming a world-class interviewer, but also the people that you've brought on just is quite flattering to be back.
Oh, good. Thank you very much for that. I don't know how it's changed, but I'm glad it has.
The art of the interview, man.
It seems to
quite
be
good at it.
Yeah, it's just organically evolved, I think. But appreciate that. So things have changed for you a little bit, or a lot. Couple of thousand miles, I'm guessing. Over the last recent past. Do you just want to give us a bit of a history lesson on what's been happening over the last couple of years.
Sure. So I've spent quite a bit of my life in Australia. I did some education there as well, and the last 11 years I've been living there and working with AIS sports, AIS funded sports. So last time we did the interview, I was working with Surfing Australia and affiliated with the programs there and the pathway through that sport, which was a really great challenge. And to be honest, I thought that would be something that would probably keep me grounded there for a lot longer than the 5 years that I spent there. So although I was 11 years on my last stint in Australia, 5 of them were with Surfing Australia and developing that new high performance program. But an opportunity arose that I was approached about to come back to Canada, and my wife and I are from here. We consider home for us was northern New South Wales, Australia, but if we were to have a home in Canada, it would be Vancouver Island. So I'm back based on Vancouver Island, which is great. The city is Victoria, and there's also I go to Whistler quite regularly, Vancouver quite regularly, and Ottawa. I work for the Canadian Sports Institute as the Director of Performance Services, and it's a new role here. There are similar roles across the country in other institutes. Like in Ontario, they've just hired a new staff member in Quebec at INS, and my colleague Jason in Calgary. So it's really exciting. It's a huge change, but no regrets. We've been pretty stoked. Like my son's stoked, my wife's really happy, and I'm really happy. It's awesome.
Sounds great. So I think we have in the EAS over here, I think we have a similar role, but do you just want to tell us a bit more about the role itself, who you're working with and how it's kind of structured?
Sure. So we work with 22 national team disciplines. The Canadian Sports Institute across the country works with 66 national federations or national teams, if you will. We work with 22 of those here in the Pacific region across the 3 campuses. With Whistler, it's more of your dude sports. So Calgary is really, really authentic and really the hub for your winter racing sports. So your very senior level like bobsled and stuff like that. That's out in Calgary. What we have is your freestyle ski, snowboard. Those are really the key ones, and there's multiple disciplines to them, and they're based out of Whistler. We have some team sports and some individual sports like say BMX racing, where their hub is Vancouver, and then Victoria, where I'm currently located today, is a more of a summer sport hub, and this is where your rowers and your cyclists and your women's rugby sevens and your middle distance and those kind of sports are here. So a mix of team and individual over here in Victoria. The role itself, after we went through and I got this really long job description, I was really honest. I don't really work well with those kind of details in job descriptions. To me, that equates to rules and tasks. And I'm just kind of not into that. I don't really like rules. I don't mind frameworks, but rules seem like rigid things to me that I don't feel comfortable with. So I kind of just scrap my job description. I can break it down into 2 simple things. I have an internal role, which I'm aspiring to have excellence and engagement. So staff are achieving and striving towards excellence and are engaged as a team. And then externally, it's about our partnerships with our national teams and basically being able to get the best outcome we possibly can moving along with our partners. And there's sort of many partners, I suppose, in the Canadian landscape between various funding as well as the way sport is administered in Canada is, you might call it complex. So there's a big component there.
I'm definitely robbing the dude sports phrase. I like that.
Yeah.
You're definitely a dude sports guy. Yeah.
I'm extremely comfortable in that chaotic space for sure. And so it's really funny too, because as I would describe it is, I've come back to Canada and I'm trying to learn French again. Mm-hmm. Because embarrassingly, I'm not multilingual, And so I'm learning French, but as I've said to a few colleagues, I am trilingual though. As we joke, and they're like, "Oh, I just thought you said you were working on your French." And then, what languages do you know? And I said, "Well, no. See, I can go to Whistler, and I can speak dude, and I can also go in the boardroom and put a collar shirt on, and I can present what we're doing there. But then I've got this other language that I've always had, which is I can go into the weight room and I can speak coach to an athlete who might be in a sport like rowing, where they work really hard to go backwards. Snowboarders don't understand that, right? But I can be understood and understand the snowboarder, but I can also be understood and understand the rower, and then also go in a boardroom and talk to an accountant and usually scare the accountant, but then we can come up with a resolution and move forward. So I love moving between those three things, and that's the main role. But having said that, there's like 55 performance services staff in our organization, and so I've really jumped up in how many people that I'm helping and working with, and I suppose you'd say leading. What I really love about that is that leadership done well is not about gathering power; it's about empowering people, and that works really well if you work with great people who have good values and they live their values and they're conscious of that. And I've inherited this amazing staff. Now, I've known some of them for years and years and years. Like some of the staff here, I actually was their strength conditioning coach a million years ago. So that's pretty cool. But just in general, I'm like, man, it's like high fives in the hallway. Like it's just awesome. Like I've honestly given about 20 high fives today, and not gimmicky,
Saved by the Bell style.
Yeah, or we work at McDonald's, give me a high five because you delivered the chicken McNuggets on time. It's like genuinely like, I'm so stoked to see you, and yes, I saw you yesterday for 11 hours, but this is how bloody great is life, and I just love that human element to it, just getting in there, and yeah, it sounds really corny, but it's great stuff, and that's a big component of that internal side. Just trying to add to the legacy that's been built here, and working on that. But I guess the other aspect too, though, is I'm a coach, right? So I've got a coach, and this is a leadership role. I could get away with wearing collar shirts every day, but I'm not going to do that. So half my job is, and this is sort of a new initiative that we're just sort of striking up this week. Half of my new job will be working hands-on with a lot of the snowboard disciplines. So I won't be going to like rowing regattas, because let's face it, like rowing people are kind of crazy. So I want to keep an arm's length away from them. But, in terms of my hands-on sport up to my neck, getting dirty in the weight room, gymnastics hall, it's going to be snowboarding. And then, of course, I'm going to help a few surfers here in Canada. Mm-hmm. So been doing that a little bit as well.
So when you talk about having the ability to flip between the three, the kind of boardroom, the Whistler and the gym, is that something you've developed without even kind of thinking about it, or is that something that you've consciously gone out of your way to develop them skills to be able to flip in and out of them kind of characters?
Oh, cool question. Yeah. So the first two to consider are really easy for me because they're who I am. So I've always been interested in training. Even when I was an athlete, I was just a bit more interested in training than other kids around me. Doing things like making my own weights in the garage and having my dad hang a rope from the garage and I'd rope climb or do things like that, or like writing down training programs as a child. Mm-hmm. Like literally I was like 10 or 11 when I started writing training programs for myself, which is super weird. So speaking that mindset and that language, it's easy for me to shift from talking to a track and field coach to talking to a snowboard coach, because I'm also the punk guy that is interested in surfing and skateboarding and snowboarding and BMX racing. So, when people at work joke, it's like, oh yeah, the BMXers with their tattoos or whatever. I'm like, yeah, I'm a BMXer with a tattoo. Lots of tattoos. Like, I'm like in my 40s and I still dirt jump a BMX bike. Like, that's who I am, and like, I'm setting goals. Like, this winter, I'm going to do a backside 360, on my snowboard. Like, it's like, that's who I am. So those first two are really authentic and easy. And then the other one, you just get through work experience and study and work life and like, taking courses like, financial controlling for non-financial executives. Okay. All right. And now I'm not a financial controller, but at least I can talk to one, right? And just having those kind of conversation times and knowing, what goes on in a boardroom, like being a board member of the Australian Strength Conditioning Association was super helpful for me because I learned a lot from all the people like Dan Baker and Julian Jones and John Mitchell and David Boyle were my co-board members, and they all have a very different skill set. David Boyle is probably under recognized for his business acumen, because he's known as this very, very scary man that played rugby league for New South Wales and ran people over, and that is true. That's totally true. But he's a teddy bear, and he's a shrewd and ethical business person. Most people don't know about that. So, you learn all these things. Julian Jones is incredibly organized. He has his finger on the pulse of a million things. I would need 100 notebooks to know what just he has on call in his brain at any point in time. So just as an example, John Mitchell is a deep thinker. Dan Baker gets the ethics of working with people and doing the right thing. So if he says he's going to do something, he does it. So, he's got integrity. So these are all sort of lessons that can be learned, and then you can, bring them in the boardroom. So I just, and then just physically, I actually just keep a wardrobe at work, man. I got collar shirts and dress shoes, but then of course I got, weightlifting shoes and, board shorts and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
And you can definitely, by the sounds of it from our chat off air, you can speak the fourth language of Dan Baker, which is good. Yeah,
yep. It's a unique one. It's a unique one. It's a special. Well, even just listening to it, it's quite comedic. If anyone is out there who has been thinking of going to the Australian Strength Conditioning Association annual conference, which generally occurs in November, you really should go. And, if you're going to skip any sessions, that's fine. Maybe you go to get some sun or whatever. You've come in from the UK or the United States in the Northern Hemisphere and you want to get some November sun on the Gold Coast or something, that's fine. Do not miss the dinner. We just give him the microphone and just sit back and he just lights it up.
couple of beers and the mic and he's good.
Yep. Couple of beers at the mic.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah, no doubt about that. And some meat, some Australian meat.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So the courses that you mentioned, the courses that you mentioned about giving you an insight into the kind of boardroom not persona, but that kind of world.
Sure.
Can you give us a few examples of ones that may have kind of give you a real insight and a real kind of education into that world? Or was it just mixing with these guys because of the roles that you had?
100% mixing with people. I mean, knowledge without application is a disconnect, right? So it's really important to see things, and some people learn best by sort of studying something and then trying it and really studying it in great detail. And then some people are a bit more like, no, I just need to do it. I just need to do it. I don't want to read a book. I don't want to take a course. For me, I found it's a bit of a mix. So I do enroll in formal courses. I just really like them. I still go to conferences, and some people be like, why do you still feel like you're getting something out of that conference? And I'm like, well, I'm reframing what I'm getting out of it. I'm changing my expectation, or I'm looking for different things out of it. So I do like signing up for formal courses. Some of the best ones I've done, probably more recently is the Australian Institute of Sport partnered with Melbourne Grad School of Business, and we did some great courses that ranged from conflict resolution to negotiation to leadership in chaos, leadership in change, some really great things. And so you were actually practicing various things amongst your colleagues and peers in a bit of a cone of silence, which is great because we would use real life examples, like somebody from one sport would be like, I'm having trouble with this sponsor, or I'm having trouble with this coach, or I'm having trouble with this athlete, or with a selection policy. And we would actually workshop those ideas together in a very confidential way. That was amazing. Another good one was Crucial Conversations. It's a book, but it's also a 2-day course. That one was really good. And then just reading a lot of business books on boardroom behavior, on organizational culture. I mean, every business book I read, I just keep thinking, this is a book on coaching. Because they really are. Like, I had a staff member come in. I keep this little thing in the office called the Leadership Library, and I just my Harvard Business Review magazines. When I'm done with them, I just put them there, and staff grab them. But I've also got all different books on leadership. So I've got my kind of high performance training for sports and strength conditioning for sport performance books on one side of the room, and then I got the Leadership Library on the other. And people come in and they're like, what's the best book on coaching you've read recently? I'm like, Good to Great. It's
Comes from that side.
Jim Collins, real sports fan. I don't know. But he studied businesses and how they went from good success to greatness. And I like some of those things. I'm like, this is about culture, and good training is about culture, and of course, legacy. About the All Blacks, like, what a great! I mean, that made me want to play rugby for New Zealand. It's just, I don't even know how many times I've read that book.
Don't tell Dan, he'll have a fit.
Oh yeah, he'll probably just wrestle me, like usually happens around midnight when we get caught up together. So, and then Circia wrestles me as well. So
he's what?
Just humility. Circia, his wife, then wrestles me, which is humility. Beat up by a 45-kilo woman.
So just one thing that I just want to ask you before we get onto the kind of training chat was, you said that you didn't expect this kind of opportunity to happen. You thought you might be in Oz a little bit longer. For someone that's done what you've done throughout your career, what did you see the path was moving forward when you were in Oz, and what did you think the kind of future held for you?
So I would have said 2 or 3 years ago, I probably wouldn't have been thinking about even sort of leaving, because I still felt like there was lots to do in the previous role. And I think sometimes in strength conditioning in particular, or now my role is strength conditioning, but there's still there's the other leadership aspects. But I think sometimes people move on from jobs too quickly. And maybe they have different aspirations. It could be financial reasons. Some people are more motivated by finances than others, and that's fine. That's not a judgment call on my part. It just is what it is. And then some people are motivated by different factors. But a lot of what you sometimes hear is, I just needed a new challenge. So I want to make it clear, I had plenty of challenges at Surfing Australia that would have kept me motivated for another 5 years. What this offered I was thirsty for was to throw myself up to my neck in the heat of the fire of leadership. I've come back to, so I shouldn't say chaotic. It's complex. Chaotic is when you're really way beyond complex. And when I say complex, I mean things like we have Sport Canada funds on the podium funds us, on the podium funds the national sport organizations. Sport Canada also funds them. Sport Canada also funds us. Like, just understanding how the landscape works, multiple sports. Like, I've gone from one sport to like 22 different sports, but then we have a minor role with the other 66 sports. This sport is moving here. This sport's moving away. This person's done this. This person's been hired. This person's been fired. Instead of saying, oh my God, it's really complex, I'm like, I have got an appetite for this, like how cool is this, and people kind of look at me funny because I've come in with this new energy for it because I'm thirsty for it. I'm not jaded by it. And people are like, oh my God, I just wish the system was so much simpler. And I'm like standing there like smacking my hands together going, how awesome is this problem? Like, this is so messed up. How good is this? This is so messed up. So right now we have very low uncertainty and very low agreement. Let's get some certainty and agreement, and we'll move from complex to operational excellence, and then we'll move on because there'll be another problem. And when people get down with it, I say to them, if it was actually a great system that was super perfect, half of us wouldn't have a job. So we have a role to play. So, let's get after it, and, the other day it's like, oh, we got these athletes that are rock stars that are in here, and, it's like a bad thing. And I'm like, really? Mm-hmm. You kidding me? Like, this is awesome that we have snowboarders that are rock stars. Like, let's figure that out, let's just embrace that, like that's really cool. And the fact that you've got these dude sports and you've got people who haven't worked with dude sports who are like, I don't get these guys. Like, I don't understand. Like, I don't understand where they're coming from, and why don't they like this and why don't they like that? And I'm like, why don't we stop asking them why they won't do stuff and ask them what made them great? Because they didn't follow the rules to get where they are, right? To borrow a line from Darren Roberts, they didn't follow any rules to get to where they are. Let's embrace that, and let's not necessarily try and, change who they are. Like, this is a fun problem. But if you look at it like, I want them to be like rowers, well, we're going to have the worst snowboarders in the freaking world do that. Yeah. These guys are risk takers. Let's go there with them. I'd like someone to build them a better helmet, mind you. That would be nice. But, I don't want people to unnecessarily get hurt or die. But, if we try and put them in a box, they're either not going to get in there with us, they're not going to go with us or whatever. So all of these things are really complex, and I just love that. I just love that I can go downstairs right now and I know that Nick is working with some rowers, and they're straight-laced dudes from probably a private school, and I can put that on and be like, I understand. Everything's quantified, everything is planned, everything has a very stringent framework, and then, go work with these other sports and then also the human element in between. It's pretty cool.
Just going to take a quick break in the chat with Jeremy. So in the second half, you can look forward to basically him chatting about it with a training chat, which is basically why I got Jeremy on the show in the first place. So not as tired this time talking to Jeremy. I remember it was probably 18 months ago, like I mentioned, maybe 2 years, when I went to bed at 10, got up at 12, spoke to Jeremy, who I think was in Perth, Australia at the time, over an event. Went back to bed at about 1:30 after speaking to him for an hour and a half, absolutely buzzing. And the same happened this time. It was a great chat. We always have a really good chat before and after the podcast, which is fantastic. Jeremy's very generous with his time, which is great. So in the second half of the podcast, like I say, in the training chat, get into a bit of depth with the jumping and landing aspects of things that Jeremy's obviously got vast experience in. Just want to say a massive thanks to the sponsors of this episode today, Invalid Performance, makers of the Nordboard, and Coach Me Plus. So big thanks to Coach Me Plus for providing the Sports Science Minute at the start of this episode. And I'm going to leave you with Jeremy in part 2. Hope you enjoy, and I'll speak to you soon. So getting on to a bit of the training chat and just reviewing a little bit what we discussed 18 months ago. Yeah. And you've obviously worked extensively with volleyball athletes and athletes that are probably jumping hundreds of times a day. Yeah. How does training for someone like that in the kind of jumping and landing element of their training, how does that differ to someone like a snowboarder? Obviously, you've got maybe someone doing tricks and that kind of thing. How does their training differ from doing jumping, landing training between the two?
Yeah, really good point. Yeah, absolutely. So what you're sort of talking about here is where jumping in the sport of volleyball is really, really high volume, whereas jumping as a training method for surfers and snowboarders can be directly related to the performance in their sport.
Yeah.
So whereas jumping in volleyball is the number one performance indicator of the sport. So if you jump higher, you will be a better volleyball player. It's literally as simple as that. And I've had volleyball coaches really question that. And I'm like, really? Okay, let's get into it. So you jump higher, you can block better because you're taking up more space, so they have to then hit around you. They definitely can't hit over you if you have a superior jump. But also when you jump in volleyball on the attack, you have more options because you can hit over people, you can hit off the block, and if that goes out of bounds and doesn't get retrieved, that's a point. You can hit it down cleanly. You've just got way more angles. It's just the way it is. So most people are just going to go, well, yeah, jumping. But then you think, well, jumping for a surfer, well, what does that have to do with anything? Well, we've already published a study on that. Josh Seckham was the lead author. Josh did part of his PhD on this, where, and he's a dyed-in-the-wool strength coach, but he did a PhD in S&C on surfing, and we discovered that the rating that you get for your turning ability is related to your lower body power, and then through a vertical jump. But then what underpins that is actually your maximal strength. So even though you say, well, what does max strength have to do with surfing? Well, it has to do with your power production in the jump, which has to do with your surfing performance. But you're not gaining much jumping development in surfing, even though you're doing airs and you're doing turns. So it's almost like the jump training that a surfer and snowboarder might do will impact upon their slope style performance in snowboarding, or it'll impact upon their turn and aerial performance in surfing, but the sport won't develop it itself. In volleyball, the sport actually will develop the jump. So the difference in training is you're using jumps to develop the sport in snowboarding and surfing. In volleyball, you're using specific jumps to develop specific aspects related to jumping performance in volleyball. Because as you touched on, they're jumping hundreds of times a day. I mean, a high volume for a middle blocker, who's the heaviest athlete on the court, those guys would be doing between 2,500 and 5,000 jumps a week. So giving them more of that is, like going out in a hurricane and bringing a blow dryer and seeing if you're going to blow the hurricane away from you. Like, I'm just protecting. I'm going to turn on a blow dryer. Like, it's useless, right? So to add 20 jumps a workout of counter movement jumps or block jumps is nonsensical, and we've studied the crap out of that. Like, our control groups in all our volleyball studies were always just doing counter movement jumps, and nothing ever happened because they already do thousands of them per week. But if you give them very specific jumps that are based on a detailed profile of which neuromuscular aspects they're lacking in, you will actually have this, it's this uniqueness of that jump style. So it might be a depth jump or an eccentric, accentuated jump as another example, or a loaded jump, or things like that based on detailed testing. That'll be the key thing for them. But the other thing too is in managing total load is in a jumping and landing sport like volleyball, you have got to know how much they're jumping. You have to figure that out, even if you're guessing. So we use microsensors for that, and we validated the VERT device recently as a pretty bloody good one, which was bittersweet because I spent 9 years trying to work with math guys and computer dudes and stuff to build the first volleyball one, right? And we never quite got it right, and then we just bought these ones off the shelf, and turns out they were good. It's really sort of bittersweet. We're like, where were you 9 years ago when I really was angry about counting vertical jumps with my little thumb counter and getting interns to write it down on a piece of paper following 18 national team volleyball players. But yeah, you've just got to know, just like a surfer, you got to know how much they're surfing. With a slopestyle athlete, you got to know how many times they're falling out of a sky from a 90-foot jump and landing with, I don't know, 18 times body weight or whatever the heck it is. You just got to know how much they're doing that to themselves. In a volleyball setting, you just have to know. If you want to do a real good job, you got to know how much they're doing it, and you got to know how to look at that acute and chronic training load.
So, do you want to talk to us a little bit about that profiling process that you talked about to know exactly where that athlete needs to focus that specific jump training?
Sure, I think there's a lot of people doing a lot of really good work, and I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all. So, my thoughts today might be influenced by something that I've worked on last week or something that I used to do 10 years ago. So I sort of want to preface that as I sometimes hear people, I'm going to say not so much on your podcast, but sometimes I hear
it can be. I won't hate you.
They're fused to their idea. And it's like, whoa, are you reflecting? Because if you're not reflecting, then you're not chameleon. If you're careful about being fused to an idea. So for me, this is, just a concept. Let's say the setting is a volleyball player. One thing I would consider doing would be to look at a depth jump versus a counter movement jump and an approach jump. So the counter movement jump reflects their block jump in general, because their block jump, maybe with a two-hand reach and all that kind of stuff, but it's really strongly reflected by simply just a counter movement jump and reach. And they also have to do that to say joust, which is a type of offensive slash defensive movement. So a counter movement jump is literally like, how high can you reach the ball when you have to joust, when the ball is interplay between the net. But it also literally strongly reflects exactly what their block jump is going to look like. So I'd do that one, and that's their normal jump. Then they'd have an approach jump, which is like an attack jump. And then you compare the two. How much greater distance are they getting with an attack jump, with a 3 or 4 step run up? And that gives you an indication of their stretch load tolerance, their ability to transfer the horizontal into vertical. But it is also reflecting technique in that attack jump. Then what I'd look at is the depth jump. And I would go pretty deep, and I would look at several different heights of the depth jump. So 20 centimeters, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 with an elite level athlete. So how high are they getting off that? And then you can profile where their better jumps are. And this might be called their optimal drop jump height, or the height where they get the best jump whilst dropping. And this reflects their stretch shortening cycle ability in terms of a high stretch load tolerance, because they have to drop from that box and then very quickly get off the ground in order to use that extra velocity in coming into the ground. So if an athlete, say, has a better counter movement jump than any of their depth jumps, it strongly suggests that that's something that's totally underdeveloped. And it could be that it's underdeveloped just because they're piss weak. So they drop. That's a scientific term, by the way, from Australia, now being used in Canada. So the piss weak athlete falls off the box, and their body just goes, holy crap, I can't handle that. You just made me drop off a box, and I just don't even have the structure to handle that. So it's not just as simple as your counter movement jump is okay. It's 320 centimeters maximum reach, obviously not relative. And then you drop off a box and it's 310. Okay, got to give them depth jumps. It's not as simple as that. But let's say their strength tests demonstrate that you're thinking as a coach, you're like, I see the nuance here. They're strong, but they're not able to transfer that into under a high stretch load. So depth jumps could be very useful for that athlete. Another option as well could be using accentuated eccentric loads, where they do a counter movement jump, but they drop the extra weight. So they can just hold dumbbells or sandbags or kettlebells or whatever you want. And they drop the extra weight, and then they jump up onto the box. And that creates an acute increase in power of between 6 and 10%. We found chronically over a training study, you could typically expect a 6 or 7% improvement with an elite level population. You could see that as early as 5 weeks in some athletes. Some athletes, it would take 10 weeks to get that 6 or 7% improvement. Just bearing in mind, though, that with those kind of populations I'm referring to, 6 to 7% improvement is a personal best for everyone that you're talking about. So it's pretty profound if you just introduce that unique exercise. You may find that their approach jump is not very good compared to their counter movement jumps. So there's a run-up jump, and it could be a basketball player, a volleyball player. It's not very good, but they have great depth jumping ability. I would say have a closer look at their technique in the approach jump. Could be more of a technique aspect. Because when you run up in approach jump, it's not the same as a depth jump, but the underpinning neuromuscular aspects are similar in that you have to basically absorb the force, use that, have a efficient amortization phase, and then provide propulsion from the horizontal into the upwards. So it's not the same kinematics, but there are similar neuromuscular aspects, neurogenic aspects to it. Other ones, of course, like years ago, I would muck around with a million different loaded jump squats. I don't put my time into that anymore. But one thing you could do is simply use an isometric mid-thigh pull, compare it to a squat jump or a jump squat without load, and then create a ratio on the force. If your squat jump force is 1,400 newtons and your isometric mid-thigh pull is 2,000 newtons, you're utilizing a fair proportion of your max strength capabilities in your jump. It probably suggests that your next improvement is probably going to come from just getting stronger, because 2,000 newtons for a 40 kilo athlete is pretty good. But if you're a 95 kilo volleyball player and you're using 70% of your force capability in a dynamic movement compared to your maximum, and your maximum is only 2,000 newtons, probably suggests that there's some work to be done, that gains to be made on getting stronger. But again, like I said about the depth jump, it's not black and white, and that's the lovely thing about it. It's nuance. We don't lead by spreadsheets. We don't coach by spreadsheets. You get involved in the nuance. The science and the number crunching and the data collection helps inform your coaching. It helps legitimize your coaching. Some people get into coaching to legitimize their sport science. That's never been my path. My path has always been, you get into sports science to legitimize and strengthen your coaching, and to give you another sort of option. So, you might be really happy with some of their lifts and the way they move, and you're like, yeah, the mid-thigh pull is strong. This isn't. Maybe you don't even like that test. That's cool. Maybe you love jump squats, in which case I'd say, okay, well, how about an unloaded jump squat and a 50% of body weight jump squat and 100% of body weight jump squat, and then you can look at the ratios there. So if your jump height at 50% of body weight. So you're a 100-gram volleyball player, and you're, let's say, to keep the numbers really simple for the listeners, well, actually more for me, but the unloaded jump squat, you get 100 centimeters off the ground. That's pretty incredible without an arm swing. But you got a towel on your back, 100 centimeters center of mass displacement. Holy cow, we got an alpha Formula One here, right? Alpha male Formula One. 100 centimeters off the ground. You put 50% of their body weight on the bar, 50 kilograms. They do the same jump, and they jump 45 centimeters. So they're at 45% when you add 50% load. And then you put 100 kilos on their back, and they're at 20%. They jump 20 centimeters. To me, from my experience and from research I read in alpine ski, in in Europe who originally started doing this stuff, and I boarded off them some older work. I think some of this stuff, even Schmidtbleicher might have played around with it. I think it might have even predated his time at Leipzig in the training center there when it was formerly two Germany's. You've really got a strong indication that athlete is your alpha male. They are the Formula One, but they're currently, could really benefit from just getting structurally stronger. Because you might sort of be more comfortable with ratios of, say, half your body weight somewhere, plus or minus 10%, should be about 65%. And 100% of your body weight, with some nuance and variation, 35%. But as Dan said on of their unloaded. But as Dan said on his recent podcast, he was a little bit gun shy about giving specific numbers. I'm saying, hold on. Don't forget the nuance, right? This isn't black and white. There's always nuance. Like, hey, this guy's got a great squat, but it looks a lot like a deadlift and their ankle doesn't move. Hey, that's coaching, man. Get after that. Clear that ankle so that their squat actually looks like a squat and their deadlift looks like a deadlift. Or, I don't do deadlifts. Well, good for you. Like, it's all good, man. It's all good. People were winning gold medals and running fast and jumping high long before you and I were even born. So it's all good. These are just numbers that are nice reference points. Don't coach from a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet talks to the coach. The coach talks to the athlete, So just some options anyways.
Mm-hmm. So just when I remember, I've just written it down, the Vert device.
Yeah.
What kind of data is that giving you?
So the Vert device is giving. I think it can give you a few things. We stuck with just wanting it to be a potential solution for monitoring of athletes who were doing a lot of jumping, like volleyball players. And this was led by my colleague, Paula Charlton. And she is a physio originally. She also has a master's in strength conditioning. She also has a PhD, and she works at the Australian Institute of Sport. And the project here was in collaboration with the biomechanics department and a few other departments. And I had the good fortune of having Paula bring me into the project as a volleyball, authentic volleyball advisor type thing, because at the time we did this, I still had a relationship with the Australian Volleyball Federation, but also I think Paula probably just took pity on me because I had spent so many years, and everyone at the AIS knew that I'd spent so many years trying to come up with various ways to automate the way that volleyball players' loads were monitored. So the key thing there was that it was about getting a solution that would allow us to be able to say within a certain limit of agreement or a certain error limit, we can be confident that if the device says that the athletes jumped 3,500 times this week, we know it's not 1,000.
Yeah.
We were looking for a usable validation. So I must be clear, Paula drove that project, and I had the good fortune of being involved. And I think I'm really, really glad because, man, I was having this conversation at Nike, and I was having this conversation at AIS with a million different people. And so I'm like, yep, volleyball vert, I think the company wants to do different things, but for me, I know it's good at measuring just how many times you jump. And that is a quantum leap in automation of quantifying training load.
So with all the focus on jumping, how much time goes into the actual landing aspect of firstly of a volleyball athlete, and then obviously is on a contrast someone like a surfer or a snowboarder, when landing is going to be the key to them getting the points or not breaking the leg or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Absolutely. So critical. So important for success. If you go for a flight, you're pretty confident that the pilot can fly. But I think the real key thing you want is that they can land the plane. and so that's really key. And I don't think it's been underlooked at all, historically, but we do need to be conscious that we tend to get better at what we measure. So, we can almost get biases in our programming. So I go deep in it, and I think it's really important to measure landings. So Lena Lundgren and Ty Tran did their PhDs with me. Ty actually works with half pipe skiing now and still uses landing training. He did his PhD with me with surfing, and he and Lena and I worked on some landing protocols to create a landing test, and then we've just modified it for other sports, and that's really key. And Rob Newton and Sophia Nymphius helped us a great deal with the details on that. And Lena's a genius, and so she wrote all the code, which thankfully Ty and we looked over her shoulder one day and just went, let's go surfing, right? Like this is heavy. This is heavy stuff. We're just going to leave you to it. So I think that's really important. And then I've had this amazing good fortune. Professor Julie Steele, heavy hitter in landing training, her son's a surfer. So she was like, yeah, we hit it off. She was like, Jeremy, working with you, it like legitimizes what I do to my son, which is amazing. And I'm like, you kidding me? Like, you're Julie Steele. So I was like, this is like, I'm bragging to my colleagues, like, I'm a strength coach, but I'm working with Julie Steele. Like, are you kidding me? It's really cool. So we actually wrote a chapter in Joyce and Lewinden's book, Sports Injury Prevention and Rehab, which articulates a lot of our thoughts between Julie and I on landing. But yeah, it's such a critical part, and measuring it's important, but also training it as well. And I'm not going to claim that this is original thought. Like if you look at like Greg Meyer, I mean, I think I can't remember, somewhere in the States. Once you take me out of California, Oregon, I don't know, it all blends in together. He's in Cincinnati or something. Super heavy hitter, dude. Great speaker. Been to a couple of his lectures, and he's just obsessed with injury prevention. Primarily in and around adolescent athletes, so ACLs and things like that. And he talks about measuring it. He talks about analyzing it qualitatively, quantitatively, and also training it. And there's just great information out there on it. Some people are like haters on training or testing it off of a box drop jump, and that's cool. They're really interested in that idea. They want to look at how people land from an authentic jump and all that kind of stuff. I like to do both. We like to lab it and control for the height so that we get real consistent time to stabilization and force attenuation measures. So, okay, you've landed from 1 meter and you're 4 times body weight and it took you 550 milliseconds. Well, to do that consistently and be confident in those numbers, we need them to drop from a very specific height in a very specific and controlled way. But I get those people that see the limitations in that, as it's not an authentic jump and land, it's a land. So, we're also going to look, we have volleyball players, and Adam Gorman, this skill acquisition guy from Australia, who's a brilliant guy in that area, studied under Damien Farrow. He brought in this cool system for volleyball players where just twice a week they would be hitting volleyballs, so very much in the normal training environment, hitting a volleyball, and then there'd be a delay on the camera and they'd be able to see their jump and their land, and then they would just sort of, on a whiteboard just tick a box like, did I have my center of mass within my base of support? I mean, we know this from research. That's critical. It reduces the additional stress on the knees. Did I actively absorb through my ankle, knee, and hip, in a coordinated fashion? Or was it a hip dominant landing or an ankle dominant landing? Did I land on both feet if possible? And we say if possible because if there's a block, sometimes the athlete won't be able to land on 2 feet at all because it just doesn't work, and biomechanists get upset and say, why can't volleyball players always land on 2 feet? And it's like, well, because they jump up in the air and then 3 Chinese dudes come up and they take out all the real estate above the net. So the Australian guy's going to have to lean to the right or lean to the left to hit around them. And so when you do that, you're going to land off balance. Well, same thing with a skier and a wind hits them or a snowboarder or whatever. They're not going to land perfectly. Like, things go wrong when a 7-foot player goes a meter in the air and gets hit by a teammate or has to adjust. Things go wrong when you go and you hit a 90-foot gap jump and you are trying to win the Olympic gold medal and you're trying to do a 1440 triple cork and it's a side wind. Hopefully things don't go wrong and you land on your head, but you might land really hard on one leg. So you kind of have a little bit of a give and take with that. But yeah, absolutely. And I the other question that often comes up is, does landing have to be absolutely context specific? In other words, does training and landing in the weight room transfer to reducing injury or increasing resilience in the field? Great question. Love the humility in people asking that question. All I can answer to that is, in surfing, all our evidence says yes. Dr. Lena Lundgren now, brilliant biomechanist. The testing reflected the athlete's landing ability. Obviously, that's why you created the test. As they trained it, they got better at the test. As they trained it, they didn't get as many injuries as those that didn't train it. So, we went well beyond I reckon, and she researched the crap out of it, and very strong, very, very strong level of evidence. So we also found it with volleyball. We just didn't publish that for some specific reasons around competitive advantage.
Mm-hmm. Tons of resources there as well. So thanks for mentioning all them, guys. I'm gonna have to probably review it and then send you the names that you mentioned, just to get some links to the resources that you mentioned, which I think could go down a treat for people.
Cool.
But I'm just conscious of time, and I know you've come out of a long meeting, so don't want to keep you forever. But I know you're are you reasonably active on social media, or?
Lately, no. Okay. But I'm at Sheppard Coach for Twitter and Instagram, and a couple nights I've thought about going on Facebook because I'm missing out, but I just can't. I can't make the argument where I sort of go, well, this, how much is this going to improve my life? Is this going to improve my life? And I know it seems like a very weird way to do things, but I do that even with purchases. I'm back in Canada. I'm hunting, I'm snowboarding, I'm surfing, I'm BMXing. My wife bought us an economy car. It's cool. She's brilliant. She got a good deal on it. Dude, I need a truck. Yeah. And so I've gone down and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get a Toyota Tacoma. It's $50,000, right? And I'm like, is that going to improve my life? I'm going to get a used Tacoma because it's going to improve my life to get a Tacoma. Yeah. I need something to put deer in the back of, right?
Absolutely.
And I tell you what, it's not a Toyota Matrix. You can't put a deer in the back of that and get away with it. So I got to get my truck with a canopy or whatever. And I just asked myself that question, is this going to improve my life if I do this, or is it, so I've gone, okay, yeah, buy a used Tacoma or whatever. Don't buy the new one. So I keep going to Facebook going, what am I missing out on? And I just
nothing.
Actually think I'm going to have more screen time, man. And my wife and I, we don't even have a TV. We've never had a TV. We don't watch television. Mm-hmm. So Facebook's just more screen time. And yeah, I think we have 3 Macintosh computers at home. There's enough screens, man. I like books, actually the ones that have pages and stuff.
What?
I like yes, it's old school, I know, but I like books and stuff like that. So I spend plenty of time with a laptop handy, and I just think it's going to draw me there. And to me, that's is that going to improve my relationship with my son? Nope. So now I'm kind of losing at home and all that kind of stuff. But see, Twitter and Instagram are not something that I would ever jump on with my son even around. Yeah. Those are flights delayed, but laptops are supposed to be away. okay, I'm going to, see whatever's going on. And it saves me time too, because you'll do a new podcast and you'll tweet it, but also like Harvard Business Review will have a new article, and then I'll go get it and I follow them, or International Journal of Sport Performance Physiology, Journal of Strength Conditioning Research, or a new conference is coming up, or I'll just read something that like Stuart McMillan has posted, and it's great. 2 minutes and read that, and then I send him an email going, if you ever give up the track and field gig, dude, like you should just be like one of those thought-provoking people or whatever they're called,
and just sit there and stroke his beard.
That's right. Walk around barefoot and stroke his beard. Yeah, for sure. So like those things, I could actually justify that they improve my life. So that was a long-winded answer to saying, no.
No, I like that because from the stuff you mentioned at the start, that you're hunting, you're snowboarding, you're BMXing, all these things, and then you think, oh, shall I do that or shall I go on Facebook? Tough choice.
Yeah, exactly. It was funny. When I was listening to the to Dan's podcast for the 100th. I was listening to him, and he got to the point where he's like, nah, that old Queensland. You're like, are you chewing gravel right now? Right, like, I don't do Facebook, and I was laughing because I wasn't doing Facebook, and at the time I was actually running in the forest, pitch dark, with a headlamp on, just to scare myself because there's a lot of cougars where I live. And I was just going, I put my son to bed. My wife came home from yoga class, and I was like, I'm going for a run, and it's pissing rain. And I was just like, I had this grin on my face going, I can't believe that I'm smiling. Like, it's cold, it's raining, autumn's coming, and I'm running in a cougar-infested forest with a headlamp on and a knife strapped to my leg, just to go, this is Canada. I'm Canadian too. Like, how good is this? And then I'm laughing, going, Dan's bagging Facebook, and I'm not on Facebook right now. I'm running in the forest, laughing at Dan. Can't wait to see him in November. Give him a big hug, because I laughed so hard I had to take a knee. Like, I had to stop and take a knee on the trail. Yeah, which it does tricks to your head when you're thinking is that a cougar and all that kind of stuff. So
you're getting neck bitten by a cougar.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But he's saying all that while sat in his holiday. I don't think he class a holiday home that you're there for 6 months. A home. In Bali.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. He's got there's like this restaurant at the bottom, and then you just come in and anyone can use that restaurant, and it's full of expats and stuff, as you'd expect. And people gather there and watch various things, like you can go watch the NRL games and the Union games or soccer games and stuff like that. And then he insists you just live upstairs, and they've got a weight room, and of course they've buffed out the weight room with their own stuff.
Yeah.
So, there's bands and chains and all the various things that they like to incorporate into their training there. It's a pretty cool setup.
So he doesn't live above the, what restaurant is it that he lives above?
Oh, it's like a restaurant that's it's a restaurant bar that's part of the kind of setup of their apartment. So you'd almost look at it like a condo.
Right.
So it's got the common amenities are like a weight room and a restaurant and stuff.
Right. Okay. I was going to say it's not the Australian barbecue that he mentions. He mentioned in the episode, and he actually Facebook messaged me when I was in Bali to say go to the Australian barbecue place.
Yeah. I think it might be just down the road, but he's the mayor of Kuta anyway, so he knows. Yeah. So he knows. He knows.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Jeremy, thank you very much for coming on again and spending an hour having a chat. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no, man. Thanks for the opportunity. And, again, like I said at the start, I'm super, super flattered to have a role in what you're doing. It's great stuff.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, mate. Really appreciate that. And keep enjoying the night runs, and just be careful, them cougars. Keep the knife.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, hey, man. It's bow season's open, so It's on. Long, slow walks in the woods. With a compass, of course, so I actually know how to get home.
Absolutely, mate. Yeah. We'll keep in touch and we'll speak soon.
Okay, thanks, mate.
See you, mate. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye. So that's episode 103 done of the Pacey Performance Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the chat with Jeremy, but just before I let you go, just want to say a massive thanks to Valid Performance and Coach Me Plus for sponsoring episode 103 today. So if you are interested in getting to know more about the Nord board, you can check out Valid Performance at validperformance.com. You may have seen them recently at the UKSCA event, which was last weekend. So if you are interested in getting to know more about that product and a potential second product, just jump over to their website and there's more information on there. So look forward to speaking to you in episode 104, and I'll speak to you soon.